Okay, welcome to Conversations with Horned Frogs, where we have some conversations with various folks in the business and academic community who have ties to TCU. So this is our first episode. We're here with the CEO of the Vitamin Shoppe, Sharon Leite. Why don't you tell us about yourself, Sharon, how you're associated with TCU and that kind of stuff?
Hi, Ryan. Well, thanks so much for having me on your podcast.
Yeah.
As Ryan said, my name is Sharon Leite. I'm the CEO of the Vitamin Shoppe, and I also happen to be on the Neely Board of Advisors with the business school. And I came to be a part of the TCU community, partially through obviously the business school, but also because my daughter has an undergrad and a master's degree from TCU. And we happen to live literally within walking distance of the campus.
Sounds like you're a horned frog through and through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So this will be a super casual conversation. I don't really have much notes. So we're just going to talk a little bit about leadership and what you think your style is and that kind of stuff. So we'll start basically with, what is your definition of leadership? Because a lot of different people have different definitions, and I'm just really interested to hear, your thoughts on it.
So my definition of leadership is about making a difference and having impact, because I think leadership is dependent upon the situation that you happen to be in. And sometimes it's about leading a business, sometimes it's maybe about a stand you're taking on an issue, but it really is very situational. Okay. But at the end of the day, it's about, in my definition, it's about making a difference and having impact.
That's a pretty good definition. I would agree with that. To build on that, is it any different because you're a woman? Because I know there are certain challenges, there are certain benefits of being a woman who's a leader, but is it any different, do you think?
I do think, at least in my career, it has been harder for women to ascend into senior leadership roles. There still are less than 10% of female CEOs in the Fortune 500. Okay. And the good news is that there's more movement on public boards. That sits around 25%, but we still have a long ways to go. I can tell you that I personally have not led any differently because I'm a female. I always just try to work the hardest I possibly could, took advantage of any opportunities that presented itself, and took a lot of risks in my career that allowed me to experience different job opportunities that we've lived all over the country, and it's allowed me to ascend into additional leadership roles.
Awesome, that's great. Something that has really taken on and added importance nowadays is empathy, and leading with empathy and leading with gratitude, which I think is super important for any leader to sort of have that in their arsenal. So is there a time that you can think of, or some times that you can think of, that you have led with gratitude, and sort of how that has looked?
Yeah, there's no question that the last couple of years have been very, very tough. I remember when the pandemic started, I was in my apartment in New York City, and the city was shutting down, and there was just so much that we didn't know at the time. We were shutting down our business, and at the time, the business was going through a turnaround, and I was concerned about our cash situation because we were having to close our business and close our stores. And I wanted to make sure that I could keep our people employed, because I wanted to make sure that that was one more thing that they didn't have to worry about at the time, as well as making sure that everybody was safe and that they knew that the Vitamin Shoppe would still be a place that they could call their professional work home. So I would say that leading with empathy and really trying to listen through that period of time taught me so much, because we all dealt with the pandemic in very unique ways. We've all been impacted by it very differently. And I had associates literally all over the world that were managing the pandemic in different ways. And so I would tell you that over the last, almost 2 years now that we've been going through this, the gratitude that I have for our team, the flexibility, how quickly they pivoted to keep our business alive, has certainly has filled me with incredible amount of gratitude in terms of what it's meant to lead this team, the tough decisions that we've made, but most importantly, the successes we've had together.
It's outstanding. Yeah, the pandemic definitely had different impacts on different industries. That's actually a really great example. Thanks for sharing that. So while that was a really great example of a success story, it's always uncomfortable to talk about failures. But so I think my next question for you is, what's a time that you felt like you failed as a leader or of a company, or whatever it may be, and what lesson did you learn from it, and how did you get better from it?
Yeah, I would say the time that comes to mind for me is my short stint at Sally Beauty.
Okay.
I came into the organization as the president of Sally Beauty,
Okay.
and I wasn't there very long to have the impact that I had hoped to make on the organization. While we made a lot of progress in the business during my time there, what I learned through that was when you ascend to certain roles in an organization, you have very broad responsibility, and I was the president of North America at the time. You also have lots of other constituents that you have to build relationships with, and I was so focused on the work of turning the business around that I didn't necessarily build the right relationships with our board of directors to help them understand what we were doing and why we were pivoting and moving the business in a different direction so quickly. So what I learned from that was the importance of a guiding coalition, and that really understanding and communicating that across very broad constituents, and that you also can't communicate to them the exact same way.
Yeah.
And some need to be communicated to more often than not. Some need to banter back and forth. And sometimes it's not just what you say that you want to do, it's making sure that you're taking in all your constituents and understanding what's important to them, so you make the best decisions for the business for the long term. So with that, I would say that it helped me with my role when I moved to head of Americas for Godiva, because I was dealing with an international business leader, and there are a lot of differences in terms of communication, culture, etc., in terms of how you do business. And then certainly when I joined the Vitamin Shop, we were a public company when I joined the organization, and what that meant to work with that board.
All right. Well, yeah, so failure into a positive, which is what you want to do. And we won't end on failure either, because who likes to end a podcast, an interview, a television show
Nobody does.
with how did you fail? So we'll pivot to sort of legacy. So how do you want people to remember your leadership style, your leadership legacy, and how do you want people to remember you?
So I hope that when people think about what I accomplished, it is what I said at the beginning, that I made a difference and that I made an impact. For me as a leader, especially in the current organization that I have, there's nothing that would make me happier that at some point when I step out, that I have an amazing team that can move on without me. I think the testament of a great leader in an organization when they move on is that the organization thrives when they step out. And so I want to make sure that I set other organizations up for success so that they continue to thrive long after I'm gone.
That's a great answer. That was a wonderful answer. And with that, I think that's the end of this episode. So I wanted to thank you for joining us on Conversations with Horned Frogs, the first episode. We will be returning next week. We're going to have another guest from academia. She's an assistant principal. So we'll have a conversation with her next week. But once again, thanks for your time, and happy holidays.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on your inaugural podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
It was great.